process of throwing them out there. And the minute I'm in a meeting, creative meeting with people, and people start defending an idea or explaining, or when I find myself, it's like, let it go. You know, if you look up the book on history of television, Bewitched, on her honeymoon, a woman reveals to her husband that she has magical powers. If you look up, and it runs 4 seasons, 5 seasons, big hit, classic, they even change husbands, it keeps going, right? Then you look up The Girl with Something Extra, Sally Field. On her honeymoon, a woman reveals to her husband she has magical powers. Ran about 3 episodes, was pulled. Ideas are worth nothing. They are worth nothing, right? Everybody can have an idea. Anyone can have an idea. It's actually seeing it through and building and building and building and building. And that, to watch why people, to hear Charles Straub or Peter Straub and others talk about why they chose. You know, there's 1,000 things that you could have made this from. The character's name could be, what did you choose? I chose this because it resonated. Why is the house here? Why is the location here? There's a reason for all of these things.
That's a pretty good question. So then, why Commander Rick? And why, was it a Chevy that crashed into?
That was a Camaro. Yeah, it was like a 68 Camaro. It was a 68 Camaro because that's when I built that whole spaceship. But there was a model, they got a few shots, they never used it, but the drawing that I did is based on this giant model that I built. And the car was just, that was what I had. Or that's what the store had when I went and bought a car. And the Commander, I just like the tone of it. There was, in Toronto, you could watch on Buffalo Television, Commander tone. So there was so there was a cachet and you know, of that name. It worked. Lieutenant Rick just didn't seem to flow. Dr. Rick, Mr. Rick, I don't know. So yeah.
Was there anything on the show that you guys didn't use? Was there anything, like, was there an interview or something that, like, I mean, there was certainly stuff that just never got used, but was there anything you guys did when you went back and you're like, oh, we did an interview with so-and-so, we can use it, and then you went back and watched it and went, wow.
Well, that's a better question for Greg and Mark, because they were the ones who then had to go through all the footage and start pulling it together. So when the storyline, when we laid it out, we were doing an episode on the city, and I threw in some ideas of what we could cover. And not just the city, but maybe the transportation systems, certainly skyscrapers, and maybe something going on under the city and subways and sewers and that. So that we brainstormed a lot of ideas about where we could take it. And that was the way when you were doing the interview, it was like, oh right, they're in sewers, this could go into the vampire show. So, but yeah, there was tons of material, because some authors are not very well spoken, some have, a few of them have severe stammers. And what was amazing to me was, if you watch them now, the job they did in cutting, because people who are not used to being interviewed and are not prepped and don't have a press agent traveling with them, they're like me now, they wander. And they just go off on a 3-minute story that's hilarious, and you can't stop 3 minutes of a show to go off on this hilarious story about what somebody did at one of their book signings. We're asking you about comic book design, right? And you have this great story, and you got nowhere to use it, or eventually you get enough of those, you go, we've got to do a thing on worst fans ever, best fans ever. That's an episode, right? But there was stuff where you had someone going along, go off on a tangent, and then come back to their story and go off, and so, well, of course,
they're creators, so.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's why you have the editor, and that's why the best phrase I ever heard about writing is rewriting. Get it out on the page and then rewrite, right? So in the edit process, what they could do though was they had the shot of me looking up at the monitor and nodding. They had the over the shoulder of the monitor, the over shoulder of the other monitor, and then they could go full screen. So they could take, you know, if you could picture the written out what the answer was, and you could go, I want this part, this part, this part, this part with my highlighter. They could, by cutting to various angles, and especially if they went to me reacting, you could actually take out a stammer in a sentence. And, I mean, the detail they had to go through was unbelievable to assemble those episodes, the amount of work that went into them. And challenging, because I had to be reacting. People were shocked that I didn't do the interviews, which was a testament to my limited acting skills. Or the number it takes it to get it to look like. And sometimes what was neat was by the third take through if we were doing it, and because I could hear what was being said, it was played back softly in the studio, so it wouldn't go through my mic and feedback, but, so I'd have the answer. And say the answer goes like something like, well, the thing about vampires is they're great, aren't they? And they're what's the word? They're classics. So then by the third time through, they were, the thing about great vampires is they're great, aren't they? And of course the interviewer, Mark, or whoever, couldn't say anything. They had to go off camera. And I just go, oh, yeah, totally. And the thing about them is what are they? Yeah, they're classic, yeah. No, it was really astonishing. So I felt like I was cheating, but then I realized that's how movies are done, right? You know, it's like, okay, the goal here is the end product. And what was neat was eventually the episodes were so good, they became, I realized what we were doing was the same thing that authors were doing. It was really well crafted, and it flowed seamlessly. So that was neat to see. You just had all of these skill sets coming together. And it was very neat to watch. And a small team. I mean, really 4 of us with some production people, like an editor, camera lighting, all that, you know, when we're out interviewing, there was a crew with us. But the core of it was
the
really,
brain trust was.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's Mark and Greg who made it happen. They kept it going. And then I came in and made it funnier. And they added, you know, Mark's funny and Greg can be funny, but I bring it in and what I did love that I brought to it was the editorial point of view of that ability to kind of, I think as an outsider sometimes you can, well, we all know we can solve everyone else's problems, right? They need to relax and they need to smarten up, and they're too frightened, and they are way too trusting, and they are just, and I'm fine. What do you mean I'm nervous? The world's a scary place out there. There was a murder last year in Toronto. There was. People said, you know, we should lock all the doors or whatever. You know, we can't see our own stuff, but what I could do sometimes being outside of it was provide some context. As Mark, what was great was Mark explaining it to me. Himself, just hearing his insight into what was going on, and then being able to add to that, and have Greg add to that, and Shirley, and all of us, just I love that process. Because it's synergy, it's more than the sum of the parts. You hear from other people, it's that creative dance, and when it gets going, it's really neat. Yeah.
We're almost out of time, but we'll try to take a couple of questions here from the audience. Does anybody have a question about Prisoners of Gravity, or maybe you guys?